Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive on something pretty interesting, I think. It's about the potential of salsa dancing to help with mental health.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and particularly, we're going to be focusing on depression.
Okay.
So we've got some research articles to unpack and a thesis that compares the benefits of dance versus exercise. We've even got a personal account from a researcher who brought salsa into a depression study. So
Wow, that's fascinating.
it really is. It's a mix of hard data and these like personal stories, and it's pretty surprising. Like some of the stuff I had no idea about before we started researching this.
Yeah, I'd say one of the coolest takeaways for me is how we're just constantly discovering new ways to approach well-being. Like these new paths are just popping up in unexpected places.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like salsa dancing, who knew?
Yeah, exactly right. So to really get into this, let's start with the basics. Like what is the current approach to treating depression?
Okay, so the World Health Organization, they predicted that by 2020, depression would be the second most common cause of ill health worldwide.
Wow.
Yeah. And despite how widespread it is, there's still so much stigma surrounding it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely something I've heard a lot about, just like the stigma and the difficulty in accessing mental health care.
Right. That's a huge issue. So the standard treatments are medication and therapies, like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Right.
And those are often difficult to access. I mean,
Yeah.
we all know this. Limited therapist availability,
Mm-hmm.
and the cost can be really high.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that researchers are always looking for different approaches that are more accessible and affordable.
Right. And that kind of brings us to exercise.
Mhm.
So we all know exercise is good for us,
Right.
generally. But how does it fit into the picture when we talk about depression?
Well, the connection between exercise and mood
Yeah.
is incredibly well established.
Right.
I mean, studies have shown real benefits for people who are dealing with depression. There are even initiatives like LMPLH, the local exercise action pilots,
Mm-hmm.
that are putting this understanding into practice.
Oh, wow. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. So we know exercise can help, but why salsa? Why not just hit the gym or go for a jog?
Right. Well, that's where it gets really interesting.
Oh.
Salsa actually has Cuban roots, and it's this fun, energetic dance style that's become really popular worldwide, and for good reason.
Mm.
It's a great workout,
Yeah.
but it's also social.
I've tried salsa a few times.
Well, have you?
Yeah. And I gotta agree, it's a fantastic workout. I can see how the social aspect could be like a really big part of it,
Absolutely.
especially for mental health, right?
Exactly. And that's what intrigued this mental health nurse and researcher named Matt Burks.
Okay.
He actually incorporated salsa classes into his research.
What?
Yeah, so he was really taking this hands-on approach to studying this connection.
That's so cool. Okay, so before we get into the study itself, can you tell us a bit more about why Burks was drawn to using dance and like salsa in particular?
Well, Burks was drawn to dance because of his own personal interest.
Okay.
But he also seen how popular it was among patients in a psychiatric day hospital.
Wow.
Yeah, but he hadn't formally studied it at that point. But what really struck him was the potential for dance to help people overcome some of those barriers
Wow.
to exercise,
Yeah, that's really interesting. What kind of barriers are we talking about?
like lack of motivation, cost,
Mm.
even self-esteem.
Mhm.
Like all these things can make it really difficult for someone who's dealing with depression
Yeah.
to keep up with a routine.
Right, right.
So Burks saw salsa as a way to address all of that. It's fun. It's relatively inexpensive. You don't need to be like super fit or anything.
Yeah.
It just seemed like a really promising approach.
Okay, so tell me about this study. What did Burks do and what results did he find?
Okay, so Burks recruited 24 volunteers through a newspaper appeal.
Oh, wow.
All the participants had been diagnosed with depression, and they scored at least 15 on the Beck Depression Inventory 2, or BDI. It's this standard tool used to measure the severity of depression.
Yeah.
So the volunteers, they committed to attending 8 one-hour salsa classes spread out over 9 weeks.
Okay, so did any of them have prior dance experience?
Actually, yeah, 5 of the volunteers had some dance training, but none of them ended up completing the study.
Wow, that is interesting. Do you think there was a reason for that? Like why those with dance experience maybe dropped out?
It's hard to say for sure based on this one study.
Right.
Maybe they had different expectations or motivations going in. It's something that would be worth exploring in future research.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the study. What were the results for those who did participate?
Well, at week 4 and 8, Burks reassessed everyone's depression levels using the BDI,
Okay.
and the results were impressive.
Okay.
At week 4, Every single participant who was still in the study showed a significant improvement
Wow.
in their scores. And that improvement continued at week 8 for everyone who remained.
That's a very compelling finding.
Right.
But I recall you mentioning there was a fairly high dropout rate.
Unfortunately, yeah. Between weeks 1 and 4, quite a few people dropped out.
Yeah.
And Burks thought the timing of the classes,
Right.
which were held during the day,
Right.
was a big factor. A lot of people were trying to squeeze it into their lunch breaks.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, life can get in the way,
Yeah.
especially if you're already dealing with depression.
Right.
Right. And a lot of the people who were in the study were probably dealing with other life stressors on top of their depression.
Absolutely. And another thing to consider is that the majority of the participants were women,
Okay.
and only one man completed the study.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to apply these findings to a broader population,
Yeah.
and even harder to draw conclusions about how these results might apply to men.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it sounds like even with those limitations, the results were still pretty promising.
definitely.
Oh.
The fact that everyone who stuck with the program saw improvement in their BDI scores, even those already taking antidepressants, suggests that salsa could have real therapeutic value for people with depression. It might even be helpful as a complementary treatment alongside medication.
That's amazing. But this was just one small study, right? Is there other research that supports these findings?
Yes, there are a number of other studies that suggest dance, especially when done in a group,
Okay.
can be beneficial for mental health.
Okay.
For example, a study by Domini and colleagues in 2014, they highlighted salsa as an enjoyable group activity,
Right.
which, as we've been discussing, that's so important for motivation and social connection.
Right. So we're starting to see a pattern here. Salsa seems to be ticking a lot of boxes when it comes to potentially helping with depression.
Exactly. And here's another finding that really highlights the potential. A study found that only 5% of GPs actually use exercise as a treatment option
What?
for depression, even though 42% have access to programs that could help them refer patients to exercise programs.
So even though we know more about these benefits, there's still a big gap between what we know and what's being done.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why these deep dives are so important.
Yeah.
By talking about this research, we're hoping to raise awareness
Yeah.
and encourage people to think about all their options when it comes to mental health.
Totally. Speaking of research, I wanted to ask you about this study that focused on dance and adolescent girls.
Okay.
It wasn't about salsa, but I'm curious to hear more.
Okay, so this study, done by Duberg and colleagues in 2013, was a randomized controlled trial.
Okay.
And it looked at how dance impacted what's called self-rated health, or SRH,
Okay.
in adolescent girls who were having internalizing problems.
So this study had a slightly different focus than Burke's study.
Yes.
But it still looked at the potential benefits of dance for mental health.
You're absolutely right.
Right. I'm also curious, for those of us who might not be familiar with the term,
Yeah.
what does internalizing problems mean?
It's basically emotional and psychological difficulties that are directed inwards. Things like stress, anxiety,
Okay.
even physical symptoms that are caused by emotional distress.
Okay, that makes sense. So can you tell us a bit more about what they did in this study and what they found?
Okay. The researchers worked with 112 girls between the ages of 13 and 18,
Okay.
and they randomly assigned them to either an 8-month dance intervention, where they took classes twice a week,
Right.
or to a control group.
Okay, I'm curious, what type of dance did they do in the intervention?
Interestingly, the study doesn't specify the exact style of dance,
Oh, wow.
but it does emphasize that the focus was on enjoying movement rather than performance.
Oh, okay.
The girls in the dance group also got to create their own routines and move spontaneously, which I thought was really cool.
I love that. That sounds really empowering.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did they find? Did the dance intervention actually make a difference?
The findings were pretty significant.
Okay.
The girls who participated in the dance intervention reported a greater improvement in their self-rated health. And this was true at all the follow-up assessments, which happened 8, 12, and even 20 months after the study began.
So the positive effects lasted even a year after the dance classes ended.
It is.
That's impressive.
Another thing that really stood out was that 67% of the girls in the dance group attended at least half of the classes,
Wow.
which is pretty remarkable, especially considering how difficult it can be to get teenagers,
Yeah.
particularly those struggling with mental health, to stick with any kind of program.
I think it speaks to how much they were enjoying it and how much they were getting out of it.
I think you're right. And it's supported by the fact that 91% of the girls rated the dance experience positively.
That's
So
amazing.
they were not only reporting improvements in their self-rated health, but they were genuinely enjoying themselves.
That's so cool. Okay, so we've seen some compelling evidence that dance, and salsa specifically,
Right.
can have a positive impact on mental health.
Yeah.
But what's the reason for this? Like, what is it about dance that seems to make it so effective?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's likely a combination of factors.
Okay, can you break down some of those factors for us?
First of all, dance is a form of physical activity.
Right.
And we already know that exercise releases endorphins,
Mm-hmm.
which are those feel-good chemicals that can boost your mood and help with pain relief.
Right.
But dance goes beyond simple physical exertion.
Mm-hmm.
It's also incredibly social.
Yeah, it seems like that social aspect is a really key component.
It is. Think about it. For someone who is struggling with depression,
Yeah.
isolation can be a huge problem.
Right.
People who are depressed might avoid social situations because they feel overwhelmed, anxious, or simply too exhausted to interact with others.
Right, and then that isolation just feeds the depression.
Exactly. It's a
Ah.
vicious cycle.
Yeah.
But dance, especially partner dancing like salsa, can help to break that cycle.
Mm.
It provides this structured and fun environment for social interaction,
Right.
making it easier to connect with people without feeling pressured or like it's too much.
And it's more than just chatting with people, right? There's that physical connection,
Right.
that sense of rhythm and coordination
Yes.
that can create a feeling of intimacy and shared experience.
You're right, that nonverbal connection can be so powerful, especially for people who find it hard to communicate verbally. It creates a feeling of unity and belonging that can be profoundly healing.
And then there's that sense of community you get from being part of a dance class, right?
Yes.
It's not just the individual connections you make, but the feeling of being part of something larger.
Exactly. There's that shared sense of purpose, a common interest that brings people together and fosters a sense of support and camaraderie.
Right. It's like that Richard Gere movie, Shall We Dance?
Oh, yeah.
Starts taking ballroom dance classes and finds this whole new community of people who love to dance.
It's the perfect example of how dance can bring people from all walks of life together and create a feeling of connection and shared joy. And that could be so powerful for someone struggling with depression.
So we've talked about the physical and social benefits of dance. What about the creative side? How does that play a role?
Well, as we mentioned before, dance is a form of nonverbal self-expression.
Right.
It allows you to communicate your emotions and experiences through movement, rhythm, and gesture.
Right.
And that can be incredibly therapeutic, especially for people who are struggling with depression and may have difficulty expressing themselves verbally.
It's like giving your emotions a physical outlet.
Yes, exactly. And it's not just about expressing negative emotions like sadness or anger.
Right.
Dance can also be a way to express joy, playfulness, even sensuality.
Right. I can imagine it feels really liberating to be able to move your body in ways you might not typically do in everyday life.
It can be incredibly liberating. It helps you break free from those inhibitions and connect with a deeper sense of self. And that feeling of freedom and self-expression can be so empowering, especially if you're feeling trapped or limited by depression.
Okay, last but certainly not least, let's talk about the mindfulness aspect of dance.
Okay.
We briefly touched on this earlier, but I'd love to dig a little deeper into how dance can help us be more mindful
Of course.
and why that's good for our mental health.
As we said before, dance requires you to be completely present in the moment.
Right?
You have to focus on your body, the music, your movements, and your environment.
Right.
And all of that focus on the here and now helps to quiet the constant chatter of the mind,
Mm-hmm.
which, as you know, can be a major contributor to anxiety and depression.
It's almost like your mind can't focus on those negative thoughts and worries because it's too busy processing all the information it needs to coordinate your movements.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
And this state of present moment awareness, what we call mindfulness,
Right.
has been shown to have so many benefits for our mental health. It reduces stress, improves mood, helps us regulate our emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and can even sharpen our thinking.
So it's like dance is a moving meditation.
You could definitely say that.
Right.
And the beauty of it is that you don't need any special equipment or training to get into this mindful state through dance.
Right.
All you need is your body, some music, and a willingness to move.
And maybe a dance partner, depending on the style of dance you choose.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Partner dancing brings another layer of complexity and connection.
Right.
which can be especially beneficial if you're struggling with social isolation.
This has been such an insightful conversation.
Yeah, it's been great.
We've covered so much, from the current approaches to treating depression, the fascinating research on dance and mental health, the amazing ways dance can benefit us.
Yeah.
But there's one final piece I want to explore, the personal piece. So what about you, the listener?
Good question.
We've been talking about all this amazing research that shows just how powerful dance can be for mental health. And I'm wondering, for someone who might be struggling right now and maybe feeling like traditional treatments aren't working for them, could dance be a realistic option? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really important question. It's definitely something to consider, especially when you think about all those barriers we talked about earlier, like the cost of therapy, the difficulty finding a therapist,
Yeah.
and even just the stigma that still surrounds mental health issues.
And even when those traditional treatments like medication and therapy are available, they don't always work for everyone.
Right.
Or people have side effects that make it really hard to stick with them.
You're absolutely right. And that's why it's so crucial to keep exploring alternative approaches like dance. People need options.
Right.
They need different tools in their toolkit to manage their mental health.
Yeah.
If one thing doesn't work, maybe something else will.
You mentioned earlier that study that found only 5% of general practitioners actually use exercise as a treatment for depression,
Right.
even though many of them have access to referral programs. There seems to be a real disconnect there.
There is. There's a gap between what the research is telling us and what's happening in practice. And that's where more research, like the studies we've been discussing, is so important.
Right.
The more we understand about how and why dance benefits mental health, the more we can advocate for it to be included in mainstream healthcare.
It makes you think, what if dance classes were covered by insurance, just like therapy sessions?
Right.
Or what if doctors started prescribing salsa instead of antidepressants?
It's a fascinating idea, and it might not be as far-fetched as it sounds.
Oh, yeah.
We're already seeing a shift toward more holistic and integrative approaches to healthcare.
Right.
People are recognizing that we need to treat the whole person, mind, body, and spirit.
And dance really does seem to touch on all of those levels.
It does. It's physical, it's emotional, it's social,
Yeah.
and for some people, it's even spiritual. It engages us in a way that few other activities can.
But let's be realistic, there would be challenges.
Of course.
Yeah.
To really integrate dance into our healthcare systems would require a major shift in thinking and resources. We'd need qualified dance therapists, affordable and accessible classes,
Right.
and healthcare providers who are open to embracing this kind of alternative approach.
And even if all of those things were in place, dance wouldn't be a magic bullet. It's not going to cure everything.
You're absolutely right. It's really important to remember that dance isn't a replacement for traditional treatments.
Right.
It's a complementary approach that can work alongside things like medication,
Right.
therapy, and lifestyle changes.
And I imagine there are people for whom dance wouldn't be appropriate or even helpful.
Definitely. Not everyone enjoys dancing, and for some, it might even bring up difficult feelings or memories. So we need to approach dance as a therapeutic tool with sensitivity and awareness of individual needs and experiences.
It also occurs to me that even if dance was widely accepted as a mental health intervention, there's still the issue of personal motivation. You can't force someone to dance, just like you can't force them to exercise or go to therapy.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
The desire to engage in any kind of self-care has to come from within. What we can do is create opportunities, offer support and resources, and share information that empowers people to make choices about their own well-being.
So in a way, this deep dive is a part of that, right? We're raising awareness, sparking curiosity, and hopefully inspiring people to explore the potential of dance for themselves.
Exactly. And, you don't need a research study or a doctor's prescription to give it a try.
Absolutely. Put on some music, move your body, see how it makes you feel.
It's that simple. And who knows? You might discover a new passion.
Yeah.
A new way to express yourself. A new way to connect with yourself and others.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
From the science behind how dance impacts our brains and bodies, to the inspiring stories of people who have found healing and joy through dance. But now I want to turn the focus to you, the listener. What about you? We've explored the research and talked about all the potential benefits, but now it's time to bring it back to you. Could you see yourself bringing dance into your life, not just for fun, but as a way to boost your mental and emotional well-being?
And remember, it doesn't have to be salsa. There are so many styles of dance out there.
Right. Maybe you're drawn to ballet or hip-hop or tap or ballroom.
Or maybe you just want to put on your favorite music and dance around your living room.
Exactly. The point is to find a way to move that feels good to you, that brings you joy and helps you connect with your body and your emotions.
It's about finding what works for you. Because as we've been talking about, those traditional treatments aren't always accessible or effective.
Right.
And even when they are, there's something really empowering about taking your well-being into your own hands and discovering what works best for you.
Absolutely. It's about becoming an active participant in your own health journey.
Exactly.
And maybe, just maybe, dance could be that missing piece you've been looking for.
You never know until you try.
So what are you waiting for? Maybe this deep dive has sparked a new interest or reminded you of an old passion?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just opened your mind to new possibilities. Whatever it is, we encourage you to take that next step. Explore the world of dance and discover what it can do for you.
And remember, it's not about perfection. You don't have to be a professional dancer to experience the benefits. It's about moving your body, connecting with how you feel, and having fun.
So well said. We hope this deep dive has given you some things to think about, some inspiration to move, and maybe even a fresh perspective on what well-being can look like.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep dancing.